Richard Donovan was a man the city both admired and envied, a self-made millionaire whose towering presence in the world of business was matched only by the walls he had built around his heart, and though people only saw the glossy covers of magazines that praised his brilliance, they didn't know the truth of the hollow nights he spent staring at the ceiling of his vast, empty mansion, haunted by the absence of his beloved wife who had passed away under mysterious and painful circumstances. Years ago, leaving him with a single ray of light in his life, his 7-year-old daughter Emily, a curious, gentle little girl with wide blue eyes that seemed to carry the warmth of her mother's soul, Richard guarded Emily fiercely, but in his attempts to protect her, he had grown distant, more a figure of cold authority than the warm, laughing father she needed. And yet Emily loved him with the innocent devotion only a child could possess, always trying to reach through the cracks in his armor. One fateful Saturday afternoon, Richard finally agreed to take her along for a walk in the bustling heart of the city where towering billboards, noisy cars, and hurried pedestrians painted the usual picture of modern chaos, but Emily didn't notice any of it because her attention was caught by something else entirely, a boy no older than herself, standing barefoot by the steps of a train station, his small hands outstretched as he begged strangers for spare coins, his face smeared with dust yet carrying a strange familiarity that tugged at Emily's heart until she suddenly stopped, tugged at her father's hand, and with a piercing scream that cut through the street's chatter, cried out, "Daddy, that's my brother." In that instant time seemed to shatter. Richard's confident stride faltered, his heart clenched so violently he thought it might stop, and when his eyes locked onto the boy's, he saw features that struck him like lightning. The same almond-shaped eyes as his late wife, the same delicate arch of eyebrows that Emily had inherited, a mirror of the past he thought he had buried forever, and the weight of realization crushed him so completely that before he could gather his breath, his knees buckled beneath him and he collapsed onto the cold pavement as a horrified crowd gasped and gathered around. Emily clutched his arm, sobbing, while the boy stared with wide, frightened eyes, and Richard, trembling, whispered words he hadn't spoken in years, fragments of his wife's name, fragments of questions clawing at his throat. Could this child really be connected to him? Could fate have hidden a truth so devastating? And if so, how could he not have known? Memory surged in disjointed flashes, the final days of his wife, her mysterious absences, the way she had seemed to carry a burden she never shared, and suddenly the possibility that she had left behind more than Emily became too real, too heavy to bear. As strangers tried to help him to his feet, Richard could barely hear them, his mind consumed by the shocking resemblance that linked his daughter, his wife, and the boy now staring at him from across the street with a mix of fear and longing, as if he too recognized something unspeakable, something blood-deep, and in that moment Richard knew his world was no longer the fortress of certainty he had built, it was a fragile house of secrets waiting to be shattered, and the first crack had already split wide open. Richard did not sleep that night, not even for a moment, because the vision of that ragged little boy standing outside the train station replayed endlessly in his mind like a cruel riddle, and every time he closed his eyes, the resemblance between the child and his late wife tightened around his heart like a vice. Emily had fallen asleep clutching her teddy bear, whispering about her brother with a strange certainty only children could have, and Richard, pacing in the vast loneliness of his study, knew he could no longer dismiss it as coincidence, for the boy's eyes had carried the same unspoken truth that had once lived in his wife's gaze, a truth she had never revealed before death took her, and so with shaking hands he called his most trusted investigator at dawn, a man named Harrison who had solved many discreet matters for him in the past, and ordered him to find everything about the child, his origins, his guardians if any, his past, and most of all, any link to his late wife. While Harrison set to work, Richard struggled through the day with Emily tugging at his coat, asking when she could see the boy again, her innocent persistence cutting through his hardened exterior, for she insisted the boy looked exactly like her, talked like her, even smiled like her when he dared, and that bond of instinct unsettled Richard more than anything, because children did not fabricate such feelings. By evening, Harrison returned with fragments of a story that sent shivers down Richard's spine. The boy's name was Samuel. He had been raised by an elderly woman who claimed his mother left him as an infant with only a small blanket and a note that read, "Protect him until he finds his family," and though the woman had passed away months ago, Samuel survived on scraps and charity, never knowing who he truly was. Trembling, Richard demanded proof, anything concrete, and when Harrison placed the note into his hand, his breath caught, for the handwriting was unmistakably his wife's, elegant curves that only he could recognize, leaving no doubt that she had indeed borne this child in secret, perhaps protecting him from dangers Richard had never been aware of, and guilt flooded him like a storm, guilt that he had been too consumed by his empire, too blind to see the sorrow in his wife's eyes during her final days, too lost in boardrooms and contracts while she carried the burden of a truth too heavy for her fragile heart. Unable to resist, Richard took Emily and sought Samuel out again, and when Emily ran to him with open arms, Samuel did not retreat. Instead he held her hand timidly, and in that simple connection Richard saw what his heart had already accepted. The children were siblings, bound by blood, by fate, and by the love of a mother who had tried to shield them from a world of betrayal. Yet questions still gnawed at him. Why had his wife hidden this? Who else knew? And what danger had she feared? But answers had to wait, because the boy now looked up at him with wary eyes, expecting rejection, expecting cruelty, and instead Richard, tears burning his face, knelt in the dirt beside him and whispered, "If you are truly my son, I will never abandon you again." Words that cracked open the shell he had worn for so long. The DNA test came days later, formalizing what his heart already knew. Samuel was his son, the last gift and secret of the woman he had loved. And the moment the truth was confirmed, Richard wept as he had never wept before, clutching Emily and Samuel to his chest as if he could shield them from every shadow of the world, promising he would never fail them again, never choose business over family, never ignore the fragile miracle of love. The city whispered about the transformation of the ruthless millionaire who once bowed to no one, now seen walking hand in hand with two children, smiling through tears as though he had finally remembered how to be human. And in quiet moments at night, when both Emily and Samuel slept beside him, Richard would whisper apologies to his late wife, promising to raise them in the warmth she had dreamed of, to honor her memory not with wealth but with love, and though the journey ahead was uncertain. One truth stood unshakable: his family was whole again, rebuilt not by money or power, but by the innocent cry of a little girl who refused to ignore the bond of blood, the cry that had shattered his walls and saved his soul. So if you, dear viewer, believe in the power of fate, in the miracles hidden within life's ordinary days, then remember that a single moment can change everything, just as it did for Richard and his children. And if you want to witness more such unforgettable stories of love, pain, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to this channel now, because every story we share here might just be the one that touches your heart and reminds you what truly matters.